Welcome everyone, the countdown continues as we're just a few days away from release of Breath of the Wild and the Nintendo Switch. Today I want to discuss with you all a very important place we've seen in Breath of the Wild, the Great Plateau. We've seen this piece of land many times in trailers and videos which seems to have been lifted from the very land it once inhabited. Now large, what seem like man-made walls create sheer obstacles for anyone below and sheer drops for anyone above. But what is this place? Have we seen it before? And will we revisit it in the game at a later date? Before we dive in too far, let's get some of the most discussed points out of the way. If we pull up a map of the Great Plateau and outline a few important areas around the Temple of Time, more about that later, and the Eastern Abbey, and then we overlay this, the map of Castletown and Hyrule Castle from Ocarina of Time, we do see some similarities between landmarks and the distance between them, but even in a few different configurations, it doesn't quite fit properly. But it's pretty close. We can also look at what happens if we overlay a larger portion of Ocarina of Time. It doesn't quite fit correctly, but a large portion of Hyrule Field fits, and where the river was on the east of the map of Ocarina of Time, now more towards the southwest, now seems to have grown into a larger river called Hylia River. When we exit the Shrine of Resurrection and talk to the old man, he tells us this is the birthplace of Hyrule, pointing us directly at the Temple of Time. This one structure is the biggest link we have to Ocarina of Time. It looks identical other than its now more dilapidated state. We've also seen a fountain a similar distance away from the temple, which could be found in Market Town. It very much looks like this area is a reimagined version of the Hyrule we played in Ocarina of Time. Well, in a much worse state anyway. Now, these theories have been around for a long time, since E3 last year. However, today, I want to look more at what the plateau could be and why it has been raised out of the ground, and possibly if it was always raised like this and we never knew it in Ocarina of Time, although this would be a pretty big retcon if this was the reason we were given in the game. Here we can get a good look at the scale of the walls below the Great Plateau. They're adorned with detailed statues, with details throughout, and some suggested these walls are the walls from Hyrule Castle, but that's way too far away if it is the Eastern Abbey. I believe these walls may have possibly always been there, but it was just not risen out of the ground until Calamity Ganon struck, and then they needed a place to protect Link for 100 years where he needed to be revived. It is possible that these walls are similar to what we saw in Skyward Sword, but on a much larger scale, hidden below the land in case of an emergency, so that then the gods could lift this piece of earth out of the ground and stop invaders from climbing up to it. Now we need to talk about timelines very briefly. If this is in either the downfall or adult timelines, then wouldn't the Eastern Abbey be the remains of Ganon's castle and not Hyrule Castle, as Hyrule Castle is destroyed in the time between Link pulling the Master Sword and returning to Hyrule? If this is the case, this could be evidence for a child timeline placement for the game, but I don't think that's a strong enough argument just yet. However, we do know that another larger Hyrule Castle was built to the north, just like in Twilight Princess's Hyrule, meaning that whatever happened, the old castle town, including the Temple of Time, was left behind long ago, long before this game begins, and long before the 100 years in the past that we learn about in Breath of the Wild 2. Let's take another look at the plateau here. It's such an irregularity in a natural landscape. It's surrounded by all this beauty. So, if the gods did really raise this out of the ground, maybe the cloud-like layer that surrounds its base is some sort of defensive barrier or distraction to stop brave monsters from trying to climb up and disturb the resting hero. I've also heard another theory that this is indeed the Hyrule from Ocarina of Time, but was actually picked up from elsewhere and moved here for safety, but I don't really see any evidence for this and it's a bit far-fetched for me to get behind. Another theory is that Ocarina of Time always took place atop the Great Plateau, but over time, the cliff walls eroded away and unearthed the ancient walls of the Great Plateau, and as this took an immense amount of time, much of the other geography altered and changed too. I'm also less sold on this idea because you can't fit all of Ocarina of Time atop the Great Plateau. It's pretty big, but there's no Gerudo Desert or Death Mountain here. Actually, talking about those, specifically Death Mountain, it's on the other side of Hyrule now. So if this is the Hyrule from Ocarina of Time, how did Death Mountain get up and move miles in the other direction? Right now, we don't have any firm answers for any of these questions, and it's possible we won't get any, but I hope we do. These could just be issues and discrepancies left up to the fact that Nintendo likes to change the geography, and as this is the first open world Zelda game, they have expanded the world and landmarks to a much greater scale than we've ever seen before. Heck, even Skyward Sword decided to move Death Mountain to the very top of the compass rather than its more commonly seen northeastern area in most of the other games. We could also be looking at a larger, more expanded geography for the sake of gameplay rather than continuity with previous games. We're so close, everyone. Just 2 more full days until Breath of the Wild is here. On Friday, I'll be uploading a quick Switch unboxing video, followed by 2 episodes of Breath of the Wild every day for the foreseeable future. I cannot wait to dive into this world and learn more about the history, geography, and people of Hyrule since we last explored it. Thank you all for watching, and see you all tomorrow for my top 10 predictions for things in Breath of the Wild. See you all then.